Look, kids, it's Star Trek Pinball. Oh no, not the one that's on Steam. No, not that one. This is the older Star Trek Pinball game that was released in 1998 from Interplay for MS-DOS. Interplay, once upon a time, had put out some quality Star Trek games back in the day, with 25th Anniversary and Judgment Rights being their most fondly praised titles in the early 90s, as well as the Starfleet Command series during their final years with the license. And then there's Star Trek Pinball because, sure, why not? If Duke Nukem can have a pinball game, then why not Star Trek? And it's not like there weren't any actual Star Trek themed pinball machines out there in the wild, because they do exist, I've seen them. But instead we're playing this and, well, yay? So this is a collection of 3 made-up Star Trek themed pinball tables. To Boldly Go, a table based on Captain James Tiberius Kirk and his various lady friends from the series, as it were, a Klingon-themed table called Kapla, and a third table called Nemesis that's more of a 2-player game where you knock down cards and whoever knocks all their cards win, that sort of thing. I'll be honest, I've never seen that sort of pinball game, but I'm sure it exists somewhere, I guess. With the exception of the last table, which is strictly a 2-player game, up to 4 players can take turns in alternating play, which is something, I suppose. So Star Trek Pinball controls with the keyboard. Your shift keys control the flippers, enter shoots the plunger, a couple other keys nudges the machine. All these controls can be changed in the options if you prefer something different, but for what it's worth, they function about as well as they should. You press a key, it does what it's supposed to, and that's it. I don't like that you have to set your options for each of the 3 boards, but that's a minor issue, and I think Balls of Steel did the same thing with its table, so I'm not sure, but back to Star Trek Pinball. There are some issues with Star Trek Pinball. The game attempts real pinball physics, and while I'm no pinball aficionado, even I can tell when a pinball game has somewhat wonky physics, such as the dead giveaway of whenever a ball holds in place for no reason in the middle of nowhere. Pinball video games rely on good physics to be fun, let alone try and accurately recreate the pinball experience, which I imagined is the intent of Star Trek Pinball, recreating the experience of playing a pinball table. For the most part, it's fine, I guess, but sometimes a shot feels off and so does the physics. Sometimes I get the impression that this game came out a bit half-baked, which explains the nudging, where you tend to bang on the machine in order to shift the ball's movement in a general direction, usually in your favor, and doing too much of it tilts the machine, disabling all the controls, and you lose the ball for cheating. While usually pinball video games have a visual indicator when you nudge, a slight shake of the screen, an audible, that sort of thing. Star Trek Pinball has no such indicators that nudging works. You press a key and the ball just shifts on its own without any other cue. If you've never played this game, and I've never mentioned this, you look at the video and assume the ball was moving to the side on its own due to the wonky physics, and that's really not the case. You're just nudging the machine, but there's no visual indicator to suggest that you're doing just that, so I don't know. There's a part of me that wants to like this game, but after a while the novelty wore off and, well, if there's one word that would describe the visual quality of Star Trek Pinball, it would be mediocre. I mean, the tables themselves look fine. They look like pinball tables. Perhaps not so much the nicest looking in terms of the overall aesthetics, and the overall graphical rendering isn't necessarily top-notch even by 1998 standards. In that regard, I think Super Pinball on the Super Nintendo looks a bit better, and that was a game from 1995-ish with slightly less gimmicky tables. But yeah, it just looks kinda meh. The game offers the option of playing the game with either low-resolution graphics for lower NPCs or high-resolution graphics, and honestly the low-resolution graphics aren't that worse off. The score on the display doesn't have the LED filter scanline thing that the high-resolution graphics does, so I guess that's a plus in some regards, but The sound quality is nothing special, a bunch of sampled sound effects and voice bites from the original series, along with a couple kooky jingles along the way. Each board has its own music track that plays off the CD, with the main Star Trek theme playing on the Captain Kirk board, not featured in this video for obvious reasons, and 2 somewhat generic sounding space themes that are generic and not at all befitting of the 60s theme. Also, if you're playing the Nemesis board, get used to this phrase being said every time you lose the ball. Overall, Star Trek Pinball is more of a novelty item than any serious attempt at a pinball video game simulator thing. And in all honesty, as much as I chuckled at the idea of a pinball table themed after Kirk and his various female companions or something, the novelty wore off rather quickly, and eventually I was just bored with the whole thing. It has its hiccups, it's somewhat functional, but as a whole, it's not that great of a game, and it's one of the few missteps in the Interplay line of Star Trek games. Pass.